I'm moving on to chapter 11. Tom and Eli are out of the explosion. They got out of the rubble. So we're going to see what happens. I'm just going to read on through towards the end now. The last two chapters are pretty short. So I'm just going to read 11 and 12 together and we'll have finished off the book. Okay? What Winnie always remembered afterward was the doctor's office. It had a few chairs, a table, and a sink in the corner. There was an imposing cabinet with a glass front. It had bottles inside. Winnie couldn't read the labels. The room had a funny smell, and it made Winnie glad she hardly ever got sick. Still, she was happy to go there with her father. She had to wait a while. The doctor changed his bandages, but she didn't mind. He was going to be all right soon enough. One time, Winnie asked the doctor about Lee's brother Tom. Tom, the doctor replied. Tom who? Tom Ching. Oh, one of the Celestials. The doctor shrugged. Did he die? Well, no. Winnie had once seen the bodies of two Chinese workers who had died. They had been laid out and covered with a rice mat. Then he's probably all right. Well, how was he when you saw him? Me, I didn't examine him. But he was in the tunnel with my father. He was carried out on a stretcher. Yes, the doctor was unconcerned. I'm sure he was, but I don't treat Celestials. When he frowned, why not? They work for the railroad, too. The doctor shrugged. It's just company policy. The Celestials have their own ways and medications. I'm sure he's doing fine. Winnie wasn't satisfied. She later asked her father about it. What was the railroad doing for the injured Chinese workers? I don't know, Winnie. You heard the doctor. They have their own ways. Probably something to do with vegetables. Winnie might have smiled at that when the summer began. She wasn't smiling now. But they were hurt as much as you. Doesn't the railroad care? The railroad, Eli sighed, has a lot of things on its mind. He looked at her a little sadly. I'm tired, Winnie. We'll talk about it another time. Her father was tired. A lot that first week. But soon he was up and around again. The way Mrs. Swanson is feeding me, he said. 10 days after the accident, my ribs aren't going to have much to grow back bigger just to fit my stomach. He patted his side. The strips of cloth were wrapped around his chest and stomach. The bandages sure feel tight. Marjorie allowed herself to smile. It's like a corset, she commented. I suppose so. I don't know how women breathe in those things, he said. They don't, she replied. She looked into the sewing basket. Winnie, I'm out of red thread. Run down to the store and buy another spool. I want to finish your dress before we leave. The general store had changed a little over the summer, except for the appearance of a few winter goods. This could have been the day she arrived. The candy was still in the same place, too. Try the peppermints, said a voice behind her. It tastes like winter in your mouth. It was Lee who had spoken. How are you? Said Winnie. She knew his face well from drawing the portrait. He looked a little thinner. I am well. How is your brother? He is better, already back to work. But he needs time to... No work, no pay, Lee explained. Railroad's always in a hurry. Summer is ending. I know, said Winnie. I'm going home in a few days. Lee nodded. You return to the house with the garden? Yes, and to school, she said. And to school, she made a face. I have always wondered about school, said Lee. I have never been. You're lucky. Perhaps. I don't always feel lucky. My father says the railroad will be done in another year or two. What will you do then? There will be railroads to build for many years. I cannot think more than that. Hey! cried the shopkeeper. He stepped in front of Winnie and stared down at Lee. I've warned you before. Stop bothering my customers. I mean to, Lee began. Excuse me, said Winnie, tugging on the storekeeper's sleeve. He wasn't bothering me. She took a deep breath. And as near as I could tell, he wasn't bothering you or anyone else either. Now you see here, young lady. Don't worry, she said, deciding the pool would have to wait. The spool would have to wait. There won't be any trouble, my friend. Lee and I were just leaving. The storekeeper stood there, gaping, while Winnie and Lee walked out of the door together. And here's a picture of the storekeeper. Winnie is an upstander. I love her. All right, we're going to move on. That was chapter 11, so we're going to move on to the last chapter, chapter 12. The train whistle blew once. Eli Tucker was helping Marjorie and Winnie up onto the train. Their luggage was already on board. Time to go, said Eli. He gave Winnie a kiss. You take care of your mother, all right? Winnie nodded. It was hard to believe she was going home. Rose and Julia were waiting. It would be good to see them. Still, her railroad summer had passed all too quickly. Cheer up, Winnie. You'll like school, I'm sure. Take care, Marjorie. I'll see you in a few weeks. Don't forget to shave, Papa. Her father cupped his hand to his ear. What's that? He asked, smiling. It's hard to hear over all that engine noise. Never mind, said Winnie. Just be careful. The train shuddered. Let's go sit down, said Mrs. Tucker. I think I'll watch from here, said Winnie. I'll come in after we leave. All right, dear, but just for a minute. The train started up. Winnie took a last look at Cisco. The row of low buildings hadn't changed much during her stay, and soon the railroad would be moving its supplies to the other side of the mountains, her father said. Farther and farther, she thought, and with so many miles to go. Wasn't that someone coming down the street? It looked like Lee. What was he carrying? He seemed to be running for the train. Wait, wait, he cried. The train was still moving slowly enough that Lee could catch it. What are you doing? Winnie shouted. I have brought you something, he shouted. He ran alongside the train car and handed her a package. A farewell gift, he said, and then he fell back, panting for breath. Winnie unwrapped the gift. It was a kite made of red paper and wood, a kite shaped like a dragon. Thank you, Lee, she called out. It's beautiful. He nodded and waved goodbye. Winnie waved too. As the train gained speed, she tied the string to the railing and released the kite behind the platform. The red dragon twisted and turned in the rippling wind. Then its wings steadied, and it rose high into the air. There it stayed, the paper dragon, above the iron one, proudly flying over the train tracks that ran west to the mountains and east to the sea. Oh, I had to fight not tearing up. I just think that their friendship is so special. And that was the end of the book. There is an afterword, so it'll explain a little bit about the story's history, I think. So I'll go ahead, and it's only a page and a half, 2 pages, and I'll read that to you, okay? The IronDragon Never Sleeps is a story set during the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. Almost all characters are fictional. The major places and events, though, are true. The town of Cisco was a staging point for the Summit Tunnel construction in 1867. It was the only time during those years that a mining engineer like Eli Tucker might have stayed in one place long enough for a family to come visit with him. For many years, building a transcontinental railroad had been considered impossible. There were problems of transporting supplies. There were problems of assembling a workforce. Most of all, there was the problem of crossing the Sierra Nevadas. In the late 1850s, though, an engineer named Theodore Judah surveyed a route through the Sierra Nevadas. Largely forgotten today, Judah laid the groundwork for the huge project that followed. This project required thousands of workers, and the Central Pacific Railroad quickly ran short of men. It was Charles Crocker who suggested trying out the Chinese. He was one of the Central Pacific's four owners. The other three were Mark Hopkins, Leland Stanford, and Collis Huntington. They provided the money and political connections the railroad needed. Crocker himself oversaw the construction process. By 1867, Chinese immigrants made up much of his workforce. They were paid less and treated more harshly than other workers. In protest, the Chinese actually went on strike. This strike, in June of 1867, ended a week later under the threat of heavy punishment. Crocker and the track supervisor, James Strobridge, did not take criticism well. They never admitted taking advantage of the Chinese. Instead, Crocker claimed, without proof, that agents of the Union Pacific Railroad had encountered the strike. Crocker respected the Chinese at work, but he did not respect them in other ways. He shared this attitude with most of the countrymen. Chinese immigrants received little credit for building the railroad. Contemporary reports were quick to mention their unusual for the time taste in food or bathing habits, yet their dedication and hard work went unmentioned. The Transcontinental Railroad was finally completed on May 10th, 1869. A gold rail spike was used to mark the end connection. Afterwards, officials of both the Central Pacific Railroad and the Union Pacific Railroad gave speeches. They were grateful for having reached such a milestone. They thanked themselves, and they thanked each other. They thanked God, and they thanked the United States government. Nobody thanked the Chinese. Yet without their contribution, their energy, their reliability, their willingness to undertake dangerous and thankless tasks, driving in that golden spike would have been delayed for many years. I hope that you all enjoy this book and can see how dedicated the Chinese workers were, and they just wanted a better life. They came here as immigrants to get a better life, and they worked very hard. And many of them lost their lives building the railroad, and for very little pay. So it's important to remember their history and to be thankful and to see how important immigrants are to the United States and our history. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I read it many, many years ago, but I really enjoyed reading it. It's sweet. I really liked Winnie and Lee's friendship, and I loved how Winnie was such an upstander. And I know that you all are too. All right. Bye.